Iowa State might be playing 1-10, last place in the Big 12, Oklahoma State, but they have a surprising amount to play for in their final regular season game.
You are Locked On Cyclones, your daily podcast on the Iowa State Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now the number one sports podcast network. I'm your host, Nick Marovets. Thank you for making this your first watch or listen of the day. I appreciate it more than you know. Be sure to hit subscribe down below so we can prove once and for all that it is, in fact, a Cyclone state. Today, we are diving into Oklahoma State, a showdown between Iowa State and Oklahoma State this weekend. Iowa State looking to pick up their 8th win. Oklahoma State looking to pick up their first conference win. Doesn't really seem like it's a fair fight. We're going to talk about first why I think Iowa State actually has a lot to play for in this game. Then we're going to take a closer look at what Oklahoma State has been through, who they are this season in the second segment. And then to round out today's show, I've got my keys to victory. I've got my prediction. Don't go anywhere. It's going to be a lively show. But we do need to talk about why I think Iowa State has something to play for here, because I think a lot of people could fall into this idea of, Oklahoma State 1-10 this season. And we'll get into what they've been through, but their only win was the first game of the year. Like, they have yet to win a conference game. How does Iowa State have anything? What's the point of even playing this game? Are they allowed to not go down to Stillwater? Is that something they can even do? I actually think Iowa State has a lot to play for in this game. And the first thing I want to point out, because I wrote it all down right here, is literally, let's just look at the number of wins that Iowa State is able to achieve if they beat Oklahoma State, right? Currently, Iowa State 7-4. We know this. We know the story. 5-0 to start. Then they drop 4 in a row. They've grabbed their last 2, so that puts them at 7-4. If Iowa State were to beat Oklahoma State this weekend, which I'll get to my prediction at the end of the show, that would obviously put them at 8 wins. 11 teams have acquired 8 wins in Iowa State history. I was shocked. Only 11 teams. I'm not going to name all the years because that's a lot of teams, honestly. 9 total wins, which this would be a stepping stone towards the 9 total wins. Obviously, with a bowl game victory, that would help propel Iowa State into that 9-win category. There have only been 4 teams to achieve the 9-win mark in Iowa State history. So while beating Oklahoma State doesn't put you in the 9-win category, beating Oklahoma State makes 9 wins possible. The only other teams in Iowa State history to achieve that mark were 1906, which that was over 100 years ago, 2000, 2020, and 2024 last season, of course. That's a very prestigious mark. That's really leaving your mark on Iowa State history. And then if you were to, I was actually almost more shocked by this one. Iowa State teams with 5+ conference wins. This win over Oklahoma State would be Iowa State's 5th conference win, because the other conference wins being Kansas State, Kansas State at the beginning of the season. Obviously, we can't forget that was in fact conference. Arizona the 2nd, TCU the 3rd, Kansas the 4th. That means Oklahoma State would be the 5th. The other teams that have 5+ conference wins in Iowa State history, not nearly as many as I thought. Only 9 teams: 2019, 2021, 1977, 2017, 2000, 2023, 2018, 2024, 2020. By my count, that's 8 teams since 2000 and 7 since 2017, which we'll get into the Matt Campbell kind of side of this in a second here. But I just really want to hammer home the point first that this victory, while, yes, it puts you into basically you're the 12th team to achieve 8 wins, which is already epic. It puts you into a stepping stone where you can jump into that 9-win category. And then when you look at conference wins, that you're now the 10th team to win 5 conference games. Like, this is no just mediocre, small feat, whatever, nonchalant type of situation. This is actually, there is some weight behind this win. It might not be against a top tier opponent, but to round out the season, to really put a cap on what Iowa State has done this year, this is in fact a big game. And I mentioned Matt Campbell there, so we're going to go ahead and jump right into that. One of my other points, I've got a few written down here, but one of my other points was basically proving what Iowa State football is with this victory. And I think that the KU victory last week really helped nail this point home. But losing this game to Oklahoma State would look pretty bad. The team starts 5-0. They drop 4 in a row. The ability of basically Matt Campbell to redirect this team, or of this team to bounce back and get TCU, which was a huge win, to just destroy Kansas. Honestly, that was a very one-sided affair. It was a very fun watch. And now to get Oklahoma State, it's literally the season of streaks: 5 wins, 4 losses, 3 wins. And the turnaround speaks a lot to what Matt Campbell does with this program, how he coaches, how the players respond to how he coaches. I feel like this is the perfect opportunity to put a good cap on this season. Like this is the only opportunity actually to do that. A couple other points that I had here. Obviously, this helps with the transfer portal, and yeah, it's not so much a gain as it is avoid a loss with the transfer portal situation. I think there is a lot to gain in a couple other departments. I would say the transfer portal is maybe more of a avoid a loss type of situation. But because it is such a huge loss that you're avoiding, I almost look at it as a gain. You're not going to bring in a ton of recruits by saying, yeah, we beat Oklahoma State in 2025. I understand that. Like, it's just not where Oklahoma State is at right now. But you are avoiding, well, do I really want to go to Iowa State? They lost to Oklahoma State last game of the season. Like, what happened there? That's not ideal. So I do think this is at least a very important game for that reason. And then I also have winning this game puts you at 8 wins on the season. As I mentioned, 5 conference wins on the season. That's going to boost your bowl game. Probably should have brought this up a little earlier when I was talking about those win marks. But this is going to improve by at least the season metrics Iowa State's kind of perspective in the bowl game market. I don't know where they're going to end up, but a win always helps, or at least it doesn't hurt, right? Like I would appreciate a win there. And then this is my last point. This is kind of a funny one. A win over Oklahoma State keeps Oklahoma State from winning a conference game. And yeah, it's not really an Iowa State motive. Nobody went into this week. Matt Campbell, Taylor Mauser, John Haycock did not go into this week saying, we need to win this game to keep Oklahoma State from winning a conference game. But you can always look at it from the angle that Iowa State is now in the upper echelon of the Big 12. They're one of those teams that they're not playing spoiler necessarily at the end of the season. This year they are a little bit because they're not in Big 12 contention, but they're a team that's going to beat the teams below them consistently. That's where Iowa State is at now, and I truly believe that, especially when you look at the Iowa State teams with 5+ conference wins, 7 of them since 2017. The only year I don't have on here, if I'm not mistaken, is 2022. Since 2017, of course. So Iowa State is absolutely in that position. I do think this is a big opportunity for Iowa State. I could see why people would say, yeah, there's not really a ton of incentive for Iowa State in this game or whatever. You know, it's just like, what are they playing for? And they're playing a really bad team and this, that, and the other. Look, it's another opportunity for everyone to get to suit up, put the pads on, throw on the helmet, and go hit somebody in an Iowa State uniform. It's another opportunity for us to cheer on our Cyclones. There is no reason to look at this game in that light, but I really wanted to kind of highlight a few specific reasons why this game actually means something. And a few of them, yes, are kind of a cap to the season. It's more like this slot on the schedule as opposed to against Oklahoma State, and I do understand that. But you can't go into this game sleepwalking because it's 1-10 Oklahoma State. You still have to come in with a fire lit because you've got a lot riding on the line too. It's not just a lose-lose for you walking into Oklahoma State's territory. No, it's not what it is at all. But Oklahoma State certainly has an interesting story, is one way to put it. We're going to talk about what that story is coming up right here after this. But first, our friends over at Omaha Steaks. The holidays always feel a little easier when you already know the perfect gift, and Omaha Steaks makes it almost too simple. Whether you're treating yourself this season or sending something memorable to family and friends, Omaha Steaks delivers handcrafted perfection right to your door. And this week is the best time to jump in because their cyber sale is here, and the deals are huge. The quality is exactly what you hope for. Incredibly tender steaks, rich flavor, and meals that make hosting weeknight cooking even easier. Save big on unforgettable gifts with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide and an extra 20% off select favorites during their cyber sale. And for an additional $35 off, use promo code COLLEGE at checkout. That's omahasteaks.com, promo code COLLEGE. Terms apply. See site for details. Iowa State heads down to Stillwater to take on Oklahoma State this weekend. And before we can really dive into what Iowa State's going to do in this game or the matchup as a whole, we have to take a look at what Oklahoma State has been through in 2025, because it's quite the story. And we're going to cover it right here at Locked On Cyclones, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now the number one sports podcast network. Oklahoma State has been through it. I think that's maybe the best way to put it. I brought this up at the beginning of today's show. Oklahoma State 1-10 so far this season, winless in Big 12 play. Their season game by game is interesting, not from kind of the perspective of, I don't know what's going to happen next. I just can't believe that it played out this way. A win over UT Martin got things started for Oklahoma State 27-7. Things looked peachy clean. Like that really was kind of the high, not necessarily the high point, but things didn't, I wouldn't have predicted the season would go the way it did based on the first game for Oklahoma State. Let's put it that way. After that win, they headed out to Oregon. They took on the Ducks, lost 69-3. That one was rough. It was not exactly how I don't think Oklahoma State had that going. But hey, maybe it's just Oregon is kind of that team this season. Oklahoma State still can get there. Maybe they just needed kind of a couple games to get their legs under them, whatever the case is. They can bounce back from this. Well, they bounced back and they played Tulsa at home and they lost 19-12. And then they fired Mike Gundy. So not an ideal start. Not an ideal start for the Cowboys. Like this just was not, I don't think, what a lot of people had in mind for how this season was going to start out. And then we get into conference play, obviously immediately after that. And as I said, Oklahoma State has yet to win a game in conference play. So they lost to Baylor, Arizona, Houston, Cincinnati, Texas Tech, Kansas, and Kansas State. And then finally UCF, just their last game. Not ideal. And then when you look at how many points they're giving up in these losses too, that's ugly. Obviously 19 to Tulsa was kind of, that's an interesting one. I'm not really sure what happened there. 69 to Oregon the week before. And then once you get into conference play, 45, 41, 39, 49, 42-0 against Texas Tech, 38 to Kansas. In their last two, I'll give Oklahoma State some credit. They held Kansas State to 14 and they held UCF to 17. Unfortunately, they only scored 6 against Kansas State and only 14 against UCF. So, there is definitely a part of me that kind of feels for Cowboy fans out there, for you Oklahoma State fans out there. This can't be easy. I credit the fans for sure, and obviously everyone associated with the program. But their season's not over. They're going to take on Iowa State. So, who are going to be the guys that kind of lead the charge for Oklahoma State? Who are their dudes? Well, Zane Flores, their quarterback this season, has 136 of 232. That's a 58.6% completion rate for 1,200 yards, almost 1,300 yards. His touchdown to interception ratio is 3-6, 3 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. That's a 1-2. If you were, what do they call that when you reduce the fractions down, simplify the fraction down? He's taken 15 sacks. His rating on the season is 104.4. It's just, 3-6 ratio is not ideal. Rushers, running backs for Oklahoma State, guys who are taking the ball in their hands and running upfield with it. Rodney Fields Jr., the leader for the Cowboys this season so far, has 124 carries for 614 yards. That's an average of 5. And does have 1 touchdown. And then Trent Howland is your second leading rusher. He has 2 touchdowns for the season, 206 yards. So not a ton of threat there. They do have 3 guys with 2 touchdowns. Sesi Vialahi and then Zane Flores, the quarterback, are the 2 guys that also have 2 touchdowns, but they obviously yards drop off when you get to 3 and 4 in the order there. As far as receivers go, there's an interesting kind of dynamic here that Oklahoma State is working with. Gavin Freeman has 46 receptions this year for 435 yards. That's an average of just under 10 at 9.5. 4 touchdowns this year for Gavin Freeman. So to me, it's clear that Gavin Freeman is the guy for Oklahoma State. 46 receptions is kind of ridiculous, especially when you compare it to what Iowa State is working with, just obviously in this game. Like, it feels like a worthy comparison. The leading number of receptions for Iowa State is Bramer, a tight end, with 36. Your leading wide receiver would be Brett Eskelson with 29. Like I said, Gavin Freeman with 46, over 10 more Iowa State's leading receiver. It's just very interesting to me the way that plays out. But Terrell Davis has 24 receptions for 316 yards, and Shamar Rigby has 20 receptions for 299 yards. Those two guys are averaging 13.2 and 14.9 yards per reception. That's just something to keep an eye on in this game. I feel like there is potential that they could strike gold once or twice, if you will. Oklahoma State could get lucky. Definitely worth at least noting or picking up big, third and longs or whatever the case is. It has happened before. Obviously, a ton of longs. I'm just looking at the numbers there. That's football for you. Oklahoma State, not necessarily, when I pulled up the stats for this game, not necessarily a huge threat when it comes to the stats. Last or very close to last in college football in a lot of different categories. A lot. And this is kind of an interesting segment to do here just because it is so lopsided, or at least the numbers indicate that it's so lopsided. The one thing numbers-wise that Oklahoma State does kind of show some green in is their defense against the run, which is not ideal for Iowa State. When you look at what Iowa State has done so well this season, if you had to pick one thing, I would say the run game. And if Oklahoma State's able to shut that down, I do wonder what happens in this game. We'll obviously talk more about keys to victory in just a few minutes. But it's worth noting that Oklahoma State does have a relatively solid success rate, number 26 in the country at 38% against the run. Their EPA per game is just barely negative, number 51 in the country. I will give them credit where it's due. But the problem is the rest of basically everything is not great. It's just not great for Oklahoma State in this one. Look, Oklahoma State's had a really, really tough season. Obviously, the loss of Mike Gundy, or at least the firing, I guess is maybe how we should put it, loss from the program of Mike Gundy. I think it shook college football as a whole. I can't imagine what the guys at Oklahoma State were feeling in that. Obviously, after a couple of really tough losses, Oklahoma State just hasn't been where I think a lot of people expected them to be, or obviously where they want to be over the last few seasons. But to be honest, it's any given Saturday. That's how I'm looking at this game. You cannot just assume because Oklahoma State is on this ridiculous loss streak that Iowa State is next in line for a free victory. That's just not how I think. That's just any given Saturday, something could happen. Any given Saturday, Oklahoma State's got a couple of trick plays, which obviously John Haycock talked about in his media availability this week. They got some wild trick plays. They get some crazy breaks that go their way, and all of a sudden you find yourself in a game like Oklahoma State has been in this season, and it's, who knows, 17-14 final score UCF. It's a tie game, with 3 minutes to go. You could find yourself in a situation where the offense just doesn't get going and Oklahoma State gets a few lucky plays, and all of a sudden it's a one-score game with a few minutes to go. Or if you have the ball, with 90 seconds. You have a 2-minute drill ahead of you. What are you going to do? I'm not counting out Oklahoma State one bit. This is still the Big 12. This is still a conference that loves parity, that loves teams that aren't supposed to win coming away with a victory. And the way the Oklahoma State's season has gone, it's been rough, but that doesn't mean anything for this game. This game in particular, I do have some strong thoughts about. So we'll talk about that coming up right here after this. But first, we're talking about our friends over at FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there is no better place to get in on the action than with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or you just want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. I think a lot of people assume Iowa State's going to run away with the game this weekend. I certainly think that they're going to win here at Locked On Cyclones, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, now the #1 sports podcast network. But the question is how, right? How does Iowa State ensure that they walk away with this victory? I've got three main key points here, one offensive, one defensive, one kind of special, not necessarily special teams, but one special reason, one key to Iowa State's victory this weekend. Then we'll get into the predictions that I've got as far as how this game's going to go. First off, first reason, first key, Iowa State offensively needs to run the ball well, and they need to stick to the run. Okay, kind of two keys in there. So let's go ahead and start with they need to run the ball well. And the reason I say that is, as I mentioned, Oklahoma State has basically only done one thing well all season. They have only found success offensively or defensively in one area, and it's been stopping the run, which I'll give them credit for that. But if Iowa State is able, if they're able to find a way to get the ball moving on the ground, if they can consistently see success there, what else does Oklahoma State have to hang their hat on? That's kind of the end of the story for Oklahoma State there. So that's more of a, if we take away what they're good at, they have nothing else left perspective. But the other side of this that I want to talk about is if Iowa State is able to get the run going and then keep it going, they control the clock. They're able to stop Oklahoma State from getting back in the game just by limiting the amount of possessions that they have in this one. I think that's another key point, and we'll get into kind of how I think this game might play out in a few minutes. But there is a reality where Iowa State finds themselves in a situation where Oklahoma State gets a few lucky plays. They crawl their way back into this game, and it's just not playing out how they want. If you're able to limit the amount of times that Oklahoma State has the ball, you control the time of possession. That's a huge win for Iowa State within this game. Then the last point that I want to make as far as running the ball goes, there's a chance that Oklahoma State stops Iowa State from running the ball early. After all, it's the only thing that they've been able to do all season long. This is what Iowa State has been able to do well all season long. I would argue maybe what they've done best offensively other than the pop pass. So don't go ahead and pivot away or pivot towards the pass just because you're looking at what Oklahoma State has done against the run, what they've done against the pass. No, don't just kind of ignore that. Don't play somebody else's game just because they're stopping you right now. Stick to what you do well, Iowa State. I think you run the ball the best, especially what you've done in the last 4 weeks now with Carson Hansen breaking 100 yards in each of those games, or not weeks, but games. You know what I mean? Don't get away from it. I think that's where you're going to find a lot of success in this one. Defensively for Iowa State, have to limit the chunk plays, have to limit the crazy, 60-yard touchdowns. And if there are chunk plays, you have to bring them down, right? You have to force Oklahoma State to actually get into the end zone, from the 10-yard line. Don't just let him walk in from 60. If you're able to bring him down, that significantly lowers the chances of Oklahoma State actually converting on a touchdown as opposed to a field goal. But as far as the actual chunk plays goes, I don't think Iowa State is going to have a problem with keeping Oklahoma State under wraps, right? I think they're going to clog the line. I think the linebackers are going to flow. I think there's a lot of Iowa State's defenses, just especially over the last few weeks and what I've seen, they're just good enough. They're just good enough to keep Oklahoma State, keep them in third and long, essentially, is what I'm looking at here. Especially when you look at what Oklahoma State's seen this season, what Iowa State's forced defensively this season. I see that being a real possibility. But it doesn't really matter how many times you stuff Oklahoma State if they rip off 3 80-yard touchdowns. Like, that's already 21 points right there. We can play that game like we did against Arizona State. Let's say that those are the only 3 plays, and other than that, hypothetically, Iowa State holds Oklahoma State to literally no yards. No yards, no touchdowns, other than the 3 80-yard bombs that result in 21 points. Now Iowa State has to score more than 21 points. And you force the offense into a position where now maybe they have to pass more. Maybe they have to play a different style. Just limit the offense or the Oklahoma State's explosive plays. That's all I ask from the defense in this one. You can bend, just don't break, right? Just don't snap, actually. I don't even care if you break inside the red zone. Gives the offense time to get a breather on the sideline. The final point I have in this one is you got to play it clean, right? We got to avoid penalties. This is that special point I was talking about. Obviously, special teams, if Aiden Flora shows up, if Kyle Conradi kicks a few huge ones through, those are all positives. But I think the key is special-wise, not offensively or defensively, Iowa State needs to play a clean game. Can't be hurting ourselves with false starts, with holding penalties, DPIs, OPIs, giving teams extra first downs, giving teams extra chances. Can't be doing that, right? We have to play our game and force Oklahoma State to beat us. We can't give them opportunities. That's just how I see that one. All right, prediction time. I do have Iowa State winning this one. It's not necessarily a shock. I think Iowa State's offense is going to find a rhythm. I think we're going to see a couple huge chunk plays, probably at least one from Sama. I would lean towards seeing one from Hansen as well, but never really for sure. That kind of guy kind of really likes to seek out contact, which is epic, but doesn't necessarily lend itself to 80-yard touchdowns. I think Rocco Becht's going to have a great day through the air. As long as he's accurate, I could see him having a day around, 22 of 27, 280 yards or whatever through the air, maybe 2-3 touchdowns. I do think the final score is 45-17, and I think Oklahoma State does a lot of that on the back end. I don't think it's one of those where it's, starts out kind of each team trading blows and Iowa State pulls away, or one of those where maybe Iowa State has a small run, Oklahoma State has their own, it's a tight game. No. I think it's Iowa State kind of dominates. Maybe they're up 17-7 at half, and they end up pulling away in the second, and Oklahoma State ends up with 10 garbage time points. That's just how I think it plays out. I think Iowa State's the better team. I think they understand what they're playing for this weekend, what's at stake for Iowa State, and I think Oklahoma State's just had a really, really rough year. And the numbers I am looking at are just, they're kind of ridiculous, to be honest. They are crazy numbers as far as like statistics and total EPA. And I've never seen a team so basically in the red across the board. I think Iowa State is by far and away the better team. They just can't let Oklahoma State luck their way into this one. Got to avoid turnovers, right? Like that's a given. If Iowa State walks away from this game losing the turnover battle and they gave up 3 explosive plays and Iowa State didn't have any explosive plays, it's not a recipe for success. Got to play solid football, not allowing Oklahoma State back into this game with penalties, extra downs or extra sets of downs. Iowa State putting themselves behind the chains. Got to avoid that. Iowa State absolutely has a very good chance to finish this regular season with 8 wins, something that only 11 teams have done prior, and that includes bowl games. Only 11 teams have achieved 8 wins in Iowa State's history. I think they can do that this weekend with a win over Oklahoma State. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section or at Nick_Marv. Does Iowa State get to 8 wins this weekend? And if they do, what is the score against Oklahoma State? Thank you guys so much for listening till this point. I appreciate every single one of you. Be sure to hit subscribe down below. It's completely free. Until next time, Cyclone fans, sayonara.